Last time we left off right after beating the 6th gym. I recommend watching part 1 first if you haven't already, but just in case I'll say that I can't use moves or non-held items in battle, so I basically have to switch every turn. Before progressing, I have to fight the red Gyarados. I decide to catch it because it's a strong Intimidate user. A mandatory gym trainer fight with 3 Pokemon, a ton of PP, and decent damage will eventually whittle down my team to the point where I lose way before they run out of PP. I need to PP stall every Pokemon in this battle since all of their physical moves don't make contact, meaning I can't burn or poison them. Both of Shelter's attacking moves, Ice Shard and Icicle Spear, have 30 PP. The Cloyster has Ice Shard and Toxic Spikes as his problem moves, and the Seal has Ice Shard. The other moves on these Pokemon only impact the turn counter of this fight, so I'm going to need to make some changes to my team. I pick up the Magmars that I left in the daycare. Even after replacing my Magbeast with them and a Growlithe for Intimidate, I can struggle stall the Shelter, but don't even come close to stalling the Cloyster. To PP stall, I'm going to need the ability Pressure. The only 2 Pokemon available at this point with that ability are the 2 roaming Pokemon, Entei and Raikou. Since they're roaming, they will run away at the end of my turn, and under the rules of this challenge, all I can do is throw a Pokeball at it with full health and hope it works. It takes about 30 minutes, but after many attempts, I finally catch it. I switch between Magmar and Entei to take the least amount of damage while getting rid of the most PP to easily get rid of the Shelter. By the time Seal runs out of Ice Shard and his other moves, my team is looking pretty healthy. I have to be very careful about Toxic Spikes. I don't switch into Nidoran unless I need her to soak them up. But if she faints early, there's no chance to win. Even if she survives long enough to eventually be the only Pokemon left, there's nothing to do except reset. I give my entire team Citrus Berries that I got from the Pokewalker and bring another Nidorina. By the time the Cloyster finally starts using Struggle, my team just barely holds on. Oh boy, we're only 2 minutes in, aren't we? Seal doesn't have any contact moves, so I'm going to have to PP stall, which is made difficult by the fact that he has Hail. I brought Lapras because he's unaffected by the weather, as well as resisting ice moves. At first, I thought Pressure would be best used for making Seal run out of Icy Wind faster, but soon discovered that Hail deals the most damage over time, so I want to switch out to Entei whenever Hail is used. That shouldn't be too difficult because Seal is affected by Hail and also has Rest. Seal basically locks himself into a pattern because of this. On the turn he wakes up, he'll use Snore, which will fail every time. On the following turn, he'll use Icy Wind, then Hail. Icy Wind will be used for the next 2 turns, then he'll use Rest again. It is possible to get past Seal without using Pressure on Hail, but you take a lot more damage if you do it in any other way, so in future attempts I will be using the Pressure strategy. Piloswine only has 1 contact move, Ice Fang. His other 2 moves are 2 ground type attacks and Hail. He prefers to spam Mud Bomb, but I can bait him into a pattern by sending in Gyarados with the added bonus of lowering his attack. But if he's not using Mud Bomb, he'll either go for Hail or Blizzard, and then just go back to Mud Bomb. And that will just destroy my team. The pattern I was talking about is a way to run him out of Blizzard without relying on 1 or more misses, especially since that would also rely on him not using Hail. When any of my Pokemon are out except Gyarados, Piloswine will use Mud Bomb, so I switch to Gyarados in that event. And then, since Gyarados is in, he won't use Mud Bomb, so I switch to Entei to hopefully have Blizzard used against me, but it's sometimes Hail. If Hail is up, he won't use Hail again, so eventually, with Pressure, his 3 Blizzards are gone. Even with the Blizzard gone, I have to keep in mind that he'll always put the Hail back up if he can't use Mud Bomb against Gyarados. Luckily for my sanity, I get the burn on the first hit, but between Hail, a Hyper Potion, and my Gyarados that health so low that he'll faint to Hail, so he can't protect my team against Mud Bomb unless the Hail stops, my team takes a lot of damage before Piloswine faints. My team isn't able to survive the Dugong's Ice Shard and to a much greater extent Aurora Beam, which has 20 PP because you better believe I have to PP stall this Pokemon too. I catch a Raikou after like 30 minutes, and since he's another pressure user, I send him in on turn Seal uses Hail, since Entei's ice resistance will come in handy for Dugong. I wait for the Hail Piloswine puts up to disappear too, before sending out Entei to resist and use up Aurora Beam's PP, since his HP is the most important in this entire fight. Now I can switch between my Raikou and Entei to use up the most PP. Eventually, Dugong only has Rest and Sleep Talk left, so after easily stalling those moves out, he uses Struggle. My team is very low after he uses a full restore, but not low enough to lose. I'm going to have to do something about the man with 5 coughings and a wheezing. He basically just spams Sludge, so as long as I bring a Magnemite that I put in the daycare earlier and switch between him and my Magmar, I can burn all of his Pokemon. Golbat, during the next rival fight, has the special attack Air Cutter. I have to dissuade him from using it, or else he'll beat up my entire team while taking no damage. I put Raikou on my team since he resists it, and switch between him and Magmar to get the burn. Then I switch between Raikou and Gyarados to lessen the damage that I take. For the Magnemite, I switch between Ghastly and Raikou to PP stall his normal and electric moves. Because of Raikou's level and pressure limiting the number of times he'll get hit, he can tank them just fine, and eventually the Magnemite will use Struggle. I have to hope I get the burn on the first try when dealing with Sneasel. Luckily I do, but I still take a lot of damage before it faints. I have to hope for the same thing when it comes to Feraligatr, but unfortunately don't get as lucky after a few tries, which is a restart. I didn't properly prepare for his Haunter before anyway. This time I get the burn pretty quick and am able to stall it out by switching between Intimidate users. I can stall the Haunter until it uses Curse, thanks once again to the Shed Shell and my Stantler, who is unaffected by Shadow Ball. If the gym trainers are any indication, then this isn't going to be an easy gym battle. To prepare for this fight, I level up some Pokemon in the daycare. I'm going to be doing this a lot from now on, and instead of every other sentence saying that I dropped my Pokemon off at the daycare and rode my bike for an hour, I'll be showing regular fight footage with the leveled up Pokemon. Cause yeah, I'm gonna need some high level Pokemon from now on. Okay, the fight against Claire and its many problems. Where to even start? I guess I'll talk about Gyarados since it's her first Pokemon after all. He's not Dragon type, but has 2 Dragon type moves, and in case you didn't know, Dragon is the best type in the game. It's only resisted by a total of 1 type, Steel. But resistances are pointless because Gyarados' favorite move to spam is Dragon Rage, a typically bad move because it always does exactly 40 damage, which normally would make the user forego 2 or even 3-shotting a Pokemon. In the case of this playthrough, however, it's an extremely powerful way to whittle down my team since I can't resist it, and over-leveling barely even helps. Over the course of this entire battle, you might have noticed the other issue. Gyarados doesn't use Bite. He has Bite, just doesn't use it. The only way I can beat this thing is if I status it, so that's a problem. I have to bait Gyarados into using Bite, so I start with Ghastly and immediately switch into Magmar. If Gyarados doesn't get burned, it's an automatic restart. But even with the burn, I have to withstand the sea of Dragon Rages. I prefer that none of my pressure users take that much damage, so I soak up damage with my other Pokemon when I can, but Claire still has a Hyper Potion, which means I get to take a lot more damage. By the time Gyarados faints, my Pokemon are either severely weakened or fainted themselves. On to her Dragonair, who also has a physical move. But what's this? It also has Shed Skin? Shed Skin makes the burn strategy statistically unlikely to the point it's barely even worth trying considering all the factors. She has to use Slam on a turn I send in Magmar, and she almost never uses Slam unless she's out of PP for other moves. Hit Slam, get burned, and not heal the burn. If it's healed once, I have to send Magmar back in, and at that point my team will be too weak and Magmar will faint. I change up my team to include Entei and level up my Pokemon. This time when I get through Gyarados, my team is in much better shape. This Dragonair knows Fire Blast, so I want Entei to tank those if possible. To PP stall the move Dragon Pulse, I want my Entei and Raikou to be on the receiving end for pressure, preferably Raikou due to his high special defense. I'm just barely able to get past the first Dragonair now. That leaves another Dragonair with Aqua Tail instead of Fire Blast, a Kingdra, and a Hyper Potion. It's time for Quagsire to shine. He's a damage sponge that will get multiple heals in this fight. The Kingdra uses Hydro Pump, so I absorb them whenever I can. Hopefully they don't miss. I still need to survive its Hyper Beam and Dragon Pulse, however, so I don't win the fight. I knew I had to overlevel my Pokemon for this fight, and it was time to start thinking about the future battles of this run. I was going to level my Raikou and Magneton to level 100 for the Elite Four anyway, so I leveled them up to that point now. I still need to strategically switch my Pokemon to absorb water and efficiently stall while not taking too much damage, but with level 100s it's not too difficult. And if you're worried that this run is going to be too easy with level 100s, then don't, because it isn't. Also, I should mention a rule that I forgot to add because it's implied with challenge runs, but I can't trade with another game. If that were the case, then I'd have access to any item and or Pokemon at any point, which makes any challenge instantly less interesting, but I wanted to mention it because if I could trade, then I'd get a Shedinja. Against the Kimono Girls, every team slot counts. They each have one evolution and you can't save, heal, or edit your team between fights. To struggle stall the Umbreon, I bring Raikou and Magneton to make her run out of Dark and Ghost moves faster, as well as resist them. For Espeon, Murkrow, and Haunter are completely unaffected by its Psychic and Normal type moves. Another important thing to note is that the order of my team is actually important for the Flareon fight. As a result, I place Murkrow in front of my team and let it faint after Espeon runs out of Psychic. The second member of my team has to be a Flashfire Pokemon, in this case Ponyta. If I don't start this fight with a Flashfire Pokemon, Flareon won't lock itself into a pattern of using a normal move, then fire move, normal move, fire move, and so on. It's the same reason that I made sure to start the fight against Espeon with a Murkrow. After Flareon runs out of Fire-type moves, I send in Ponyta on a Normal-type attack and make sure to have the Haunter as my third party member, so he's sent in first next fight. I also should mention that my team is getting pretty beat up since I only have one Ghost-type to be unaffected by normal moves. Since I start this fight with my Ghost-type Pokemon, Jolteon will go for his Electric move, so I switch between my Quagsire and Haunter to stall out his Normal and Electric moves. Don't worry, the Kimono Girls saved the hardest battle for last. TP stalling Vaporeon is unlike all of the other fights before this. It has two normal type moves, one water move, and most importantly, one ice move, Aurora Beam. Not only do I have no way to exploit ice type by being unaffected, but having three types causes Vaporeon's attacks to be unpredictable in nature, so being unaffected by water and normal is now a gamble instead of a sure thing. By that, I mean Vaporeon has no pattern to his attacks. Consider me having a Quagsire out. If I switch to Haunter, the Vaporeon could go for Quick Attack or Last Resort, which would be great because I'm unaffected. Alternatively, it could go for Aurora Beam, which almost knocks Haunter out in one hit. Because of this, and how much it takes to even get to this fight in the first place, I have to be extremely careful with my switches and try to use pressure against Aurora Beam. In the end, my team is hanging on by a thread, but I managed to beat the Kimono Girls. The last rival fight is too similar to the previous one to really talk about, and with that out of the way, all that's left is the Elite Four. Unsurprisingly, this is going to be insanely difficult, and a large part of that is going to be putting together the right team. As you probably know, you can't change your team in between Elite Four members. This is a big deal when my teams are already carefully selected for almost every battle. After reading and rereading every Elite Four member's team and movesets, I select these 6 Pokemon: Gyarados, Nidorina, Magmar, Murkrow, Raikou, and Magneton. I leveled up all of my Pokemon to 100 for this because I didn't want to have to restart the entire Elite Four by not being able to beat Lance if I would have survived at level 100 rather than 99 for example. You can't get the Evolution Stone for Murkrow until after beating the Elite Four, and I don't evolve Nidorina yet on purpose. But one thing I did purposely do before entering the Elite Four that will make my Pokemon immune to status moves as well as allow them not to use a move without having to switch is put them all to sleep. So this is why people say sleep is OP in Pokemon. Hoot Hoot learns Hypnosis at level 9, and at night National Park has a 100% chance to spawn a Hoot Hoot between levels 10 and 14. Now, my unconscious Pokemon are ready to take on the Elite Four. All of Will's Pokemon know one Psychic move, and that move is Psychic. So all I have to do is switch in Murkrow, and his Pokemon will be forced to use their worst moves, and in some cases, contact moves. Like how the Xatu used U-turn, which gives me a chance to burn it. This Slowbro, however, knows no contact moves, and has two moves that matter, Psychic and Water Pulse, so I have to PP stall it. I do this by switching between my Murkrow and Raikou. Murkrow is immune to Psychic, and Raikou halves the amount of Water Pulses Slowbro can use. So after those run out, Slowbro raises his stats, only to have his attack lowered by Intimidate before using Struggle, and eventually faints. The Jinx also has Psychic, so after remembering that, I switch into Murkrow and then Magmar to get the burn. By switching between Gyarados and Murkrow, it's easy to stall for burn damage. Back in comes Xatu, who I use the same strategy to try and burn. I don't get it this time, and Executor is switched in. The only two moves Executor has that matter are Psychic and Egg Bomb. Egg Bomb is a powerful yet inaccurate physical move that doesn't make contact, so I mostly switch between my Gyarados and Murkrow, and eventually it uses Struggle. All that's left are two Xatus. The one we keep seeing U-turns away, sending in the more concerning one. Unlike the first, it has two special attacks, Psychic and Ominous Wind. It takes multiple contact moves to burn him, to the point it actually ran out of Psychic. But thanks to Murkrow, I can afford to get hit by all of the moves that aren't Psychic. The same is true for the next Xatu. Koga is a lot tougher, and would be a much bigger issue if my Pokemon weren't asleep, thanks to his many poison-inducing moves like this Ariados's Poison Jab. It also knows the move Spiderweb, which is just a bug-type mean look. Because of this, Magmar and Gyarados are holding Shed Shells instead of Citrus Berries. I picked these two specifically for Intimidate and Flame Body. After using his full restore, he never gets burned with Poison Jab again. His other attacking move is Giga Drain, and after he runs out of that, he only has Baton Pass. Fortress only has Protect, Toxic Spikes, Explosion, and Swift. So Swift and Explosion are all I care about. After running out of Swift, he's forced into using Explosion. Muck's only move that matters is Gunk Shot. He has Toxic, but I'm asleep. By switching between Gyarados and Magneton, I can bait out all of his Gunk Shots and be unaffected. After that, all of his other moves basically just increase the turn counter, and he's forced to struggle. Up next is Venomoth with Supersonic, Gust, Psychic, and Toxic. Supersonic and Toxic don't matter, so I switch between Murkrow and Gyarados to preemptively lower his struggle damage while being immune to Psychic. Eventually, I switch between Raikou and Murkrow instead to speed up the PP stall while taking less damage. The Crobat has contact moves, so it can actually be burned. I lower his attack with Gyarados a couple times before burning it, and with the attack lowered from Burn and Intimidate, stalling is no issue. All that's left now is the Ariados with only Baton Pass left, so obviously I just stall that out until it uses Struggle. Hitmontop is very easy to deal with thanks to all of its contact moves and being able to send in one of my flying types whenever it uses Dig. Even after a full restore, it just gets poisoned again. Hitmonchan has the elemental punches, so before trying to status him, I switch between Gyarados and Magneton to take the least amount of damage while intimidating him multiple times. Eventually, I began switching between my Nidorina and Magmar, but it takes a long time to status him. After I do though, I can switch between tankier and more expendable members for this fight until he faints. Onix is one of the scariest Pokemon in the Elite Four. It has the moves Dragon Breath, Earthquake, Sandstorm, and Rock Slide. None of them are contact moves, but they're all really good moves that I have to PP stall. Once again, I want to use Pressure on the Weather move. I made sure to bring a flying type for Earthquake, and Magneton is here to resist Dragon moves and Rock Slide. As long as I strategically switch around these moves, I can eventually survive long enough that he'll use Struggle. Next up is Machamp, and before attempting to status him, I switch between my Gyarados and Magneton to lower his attack. After he gets poisoned, he's no problem. I do the exact same thing against Hitmonlee and win the fight. Karen is the most difficult member so far, but only because of one Pokemon, her Houndoom that likes to set up nasty plot. But I'm getting ahead of myself. First, I have to deal with Umbreon. That isn't too difficult because the only moves that matter are Feint Attack and Payback. She will always use her full restore on Umbreon, and that's really important. After burning it for the second time, I make sure Magneton is the Pokemon in on the turn it faints. This makes her send out Houndoom next. It has Nasty Plot, which raises special attack by 2 stages, Flamethrower, Dark Pulse, and Crunch. If it goes for Nasty Plot, I lose, and oh boy does it like to go for Nasty Plot. Keep in mind that every time I try to poison Houndoom, I have to fight the Umbreon with the full restore. The Houndoom goes for Crunch about 5% of the time, and if he does use Crunch, I have to get the 30% poison point chance. After way too many tries, I finally get the poison. And the reason I wanted Houndoom in right after Umbreon is partially to know if I have to reset the battle right away, but mostly thanks to a quirk in the AI where it won't use its second full restore if the Pokemon before it had one used on it. After that, the only real issue is Vileplume, who beats up my team with Petal Dance and heals with Moonlight, but after it faints, the battle is basically over. Lance starts strong with the Gyarados, who is a mixed attacker, with its special attacking move being Dragon Pulse. I need to conserve the HP of my Flame Body and Poison Point users, so I switch between Gyarados and Magneton to take as little damage as I can to Dragon Pulse while lowering the opposing Gyarados' attack. The previous members of the Elite Four were more of a logic puzzle in that my team's health didn't get that low, but that was only thanks to the careful planning of my party to have the right answers. For example, if I didn't have a Dark type to be completely unaffected by Psychic, I wouldn't be able to get through the first fight. Also, Intimidate made a large portion of damage I would have taken disappear. But this fight is different in that my Pokemon will faint. Lance does a lot more damage and has a larger variety of moves that will give me trouble. He also uses a lot of full restores, which can normally be countered by one-shotting his Pokemon, but that isn't the case here. After Gyarados faints, it's time for Dragonite number 1. This particular one has Thunder Wave, Dragon Rush, Thunder, and Hyper Beam. Dragon Rush is a powerful physical contact move, so Flame Body and Poison Point will be the main way I deal with Dragonite. I need to lower Dragonite's attack before attempting to status him, so I switch between Gyarados and Raikou until it's -6. As you can see on screen, I really do take a lot of damage, and on this particular attempt, instead of getting a status effect, I end up PP stalling all of Dragonite's moves, which is an inefficient use of my health. The level 50 Dragonite knows Fire Blast, Safeguard, Outrage, and Hyper Beam. If he uses Safeguard, I can't status him for 5 turns, and that can lose me an attempt since every bit of health counts. I lower his attack before trying to status him, so if he uses it early, that's not a big deal. I get through him this time with Poison. Aerodactyl knows Aerial Ace, Crunch, Rock Slide, and Thunderfang. This is a deadly combination of moves that could leave my status Pokemon in rough shape if I don't figure out how to properly bait a certain pattern. Aerodactyl leaves me in such rough a shape that I can't do anything to the next Dragonite. It's time to evolve my Nidorina with a Moonstone. This will give her better stats in addition to the poison ground typing. I didn't evolve her before, so she could better tank moves like Petal Dance. And I wasn't sure if adding ground type would make her worse overall since she now takes more damage to Waterfall and Blizzard, so I don't save after evolving. For the rest of my fights, I always make sure Gyarados is -6 before trying to status him. Charizard is difficult to status since he likes to spam his only non-contact move, Air Slash. I can't stress enough just how much damage my team takes every fight, and his Dragonites will often run out of PP, which means even more damage. Thanks for watching. I'll very likely do this challenge in Kanto and show at least the fight against Red. So if you're interested, subscribe so you don't miss it. And let me know in the comments if that's actually something you'd want to see. It'll probably motivate me to get it out faster. And I've got a lot more challenge runs I'm planning on doing, Pokemon and other games. The next Pokemon one is probably going to be a lot more difficult than this one.